There we go. We are live. Hello, everyone. I'm back here with yet another interesting session from my very good friend Diego Molina. We go way back. A lot of sessions. Couple of years to look back. We have been partners in crime for many workshops that we did together, and so glad to be hosting Diego at TestMu by LambdaTest. Diego, welcome to TestMu.
Thank you, Manoj. Thank you for inviting me. And happy to be here to share some hopefully good content for your audience.
Absolutely, there's no doubt about it. Before we dive in, folks, Diego Molina has been a core committer of Selenium for a couple of years now. He's been the core maintainer of Selenium as well as Docker-Selenium. He is part of the technical leadership committee for Selenium. It's the team that decides the technical direction of the project. So anything related to Selenium, you got the man to get got hold of. Any questions related to Selenium? Yes, Tiger will be hanging around in the table post the session, and particularly this session. And also he works at Sauce Labs. So thanks, Diego, for coming our way and delivering this talk. About this session, the web has evolved. Has your testing evolved too? It will be a very interesting session. I've looked at the abstract, and it definitely sounded very interesting to me. Talking about, we all know the days where web has started from being it, developing it JSP pages and ASP.NET to now being it in HTML5 and CSS. A lot of evolution. But if we really step back and ask a question around, has the testing been really evolved? There we go. Diego is to explain all his research and his practical experiences to all of us. With no further ado, Diego, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Um, Thank you, everyone, for joining. I think it's my first time doing a presentation this late in the evening. So I'm actually based in Berlin, and it's around 11:05 right now. So I will try to stay very alert to your comments and to your questions. So as Manoj said, I'm going to talk about in general how testing um, could have evolved or has evolved, and but don't limit your questions to the topic I'm going to talk about today. If you have questions about the Selenium project, I'm very much open to hear your questions. So yeah, I'm a core member of the Selenium project. I've been in testing for around, you could say, 8 to 9 years. At the beginning as a user, and then I slowly went into the path of contributing to the open source project. And yeah, today I am spending 95% of my time working in the Selenium project. Um, I want to share with you a few things today. I want to talk about the web and the evolution of testing next to the evolution of the web, and how Selenium fits in today's testing, taking into account all this evolution we are talking about. Then I will have a demo. I will have an application that I created for these demo purposes that resembles somehow a bit how this modern application works. And then we're going to have a bit into the future to see what Selenium is bringing to us in the near future. So yeah, Selenium 4 is here for about a bit more than 1 year, and we spent over 3 years in development, which was way longer than what it should have taken. Um, Tons of commits, new grid, new website, new docs, so many new features, right? And most of these new features are aligned into the new concepts of testing, like how should we test these applications, how should we actually plan our testing, what should we take into account when we test a web application, and so forth. But so much content has been pushed out there, but I believe we haven't really thought about how is the new version of Selenium fitting in today's testing world. So before moving on, I just want to highlight that Selenium is an open source project that is free as in speech. So we have a complete open and transparent open governance, being redundant there. And it's entirely based on standards. So this means that we are part of the W3C organization, and we sit down on a table very often, monthly basis, with different people from different companies, from Apple, Mozilla, Microsoft, and Google, and we work with them together to develop standards that are useful for browser and test automation. Examples of that are the bidirectional protocol that is under development, and also the standardization of Shadow DOM through WebDriver. And one key thing that I like to highlight always is that Selenium has been made by and for the community. So let's jump into the topic we want to cover today. So web and the evolution of testing next to the evolution of web. So before going into the topic, I just want to highlight that this will be like a very brief 3 to 4 slides recount of the evolution of web. Of course, you can find way longer talks in YouTube and in other places, but I'm just going to try to highlight the main ideas and what has evolved and how this matters to testing. So way at the beginning, we had mostly static or very limited websites, right? The main purpose of them was to show content to you as a user, and there were some attempts to have e-commerce websites. So the interaction between the user and the website was very little, so mostly consuming content, and there was a lot of server-side rendering. So maybe if you remember that if you were filling out a form where you had to fill out like email, address, and tons of data, and there was a mistake in one of the fields, and you were clicking on send, you were getting back an error saying that there was an error in a given field, but all the form was empty. This is because all the data went to the server, and it was rendered over there, and then went back with the error. So actually, it wasn't that smart back then. And testing during those days was mostly focused on desktop apps. There was almost no testing in web applications, and the focus was mostly, manual and exploratory testing. So when we move a bit forward into the future, we started to see some applications that were interactive. You were able to have the possibility to create content in a very simple way, which means you could have like a blog post and you were able to write comments to it. So your comments, you were able to create, you were able to create content back there. There was some dynamic HTML because we started to introduce the technology that was allowing us to do some client-side rendering. So with the DOM manipulation, JavaScript, like CSS, were helping us to do these things. And more importantly, so we had jQuery, right? During those days, we had QTP that I think today is called UTF, and Selenium. So the first versions of Selenium were happening there, and they were that was basically what Jason Huggins was pushing with the first version of Selenium. That works very similarly to the way Cypress works today. So I'm glad they're catching up slowly, but they're catching up with us. So then we moved a bit further into the web frameworks era, when you started talking about the concept of the model view controller, where you were thinking about splitting responsibilities in web applications. You were having APIs that were taking care of business logic, and they were doing heavy lifting for business processes and then sending back information that was already processed. Like division of responsibilities. And frameworks like Ember and Angular started to come up, and we started to talk about components. So probably one of the most popular right now is the React framework, that you are basically using components the whole time. And also you have heard of Vue and Polymer. And one of these important changes through this evolution is that now you can do testing on different levels in a much more easier way. You don't have this monoliths that all the code is in one single place. And if you want to test maybe an integration, or if you want to test in a unit test way, it was much harder because you need to actually go inside the application. Now, all these frameworks that are offering components, for example, they offer different ways to test. And in general, what I have seen, what I conclude after going through all this content is that end-to-end testing tools are not the only option you can use to do testing. So let's highlight a bit this phrase. So a tool to do end-to-end testing is not the only option nowadays, because there is like a trend, or there are like two trends. Let's call it like that. One trend is the type of tool that will do everything for you. So there is a type of tool that will do browser testing, API testing, component testing. And this type of tool is really good from the functional point of view, because you have a lot of features in it. And most of the time, getting onboarded into this tool will be very easy and will be very pleasant. But in the long term, since you're putting all your eggs in one single basket, you will be doing your testing only in scope of the strategy that this tool offers you. So you are not longer a tester who is allowed to think out of the box, but you're thinking inside the box of that tool. So in my opinion, using a single tool is not efficient anymore, because if you are putting all your efforts in one single tool, when that tool maybe starts not supporting something, or maybe changing the way it works, you will be forced to start using something different. And there is another trend. So one trend is like using a single tool for everything, and the other trend is the type of tester who is thinking about what should I test, and when the tester figures out what to test, then it starts thinking about what tools I need to do this testing. So for example, if you need to do API testing or component testing, you will actually think about the right tool to do that type of testing. So for example, using a browser testing tool for API testing is doable, it's possible, but might not be the best choice, because using a browser testing tool will use a lot of resources for a single API test. And in general, we have seen through history, and you can read a lot of literature about that, that when you have a successful strategy is when you actually spread your eggs in different baskets. So you have different approaches, you rely on them, and you have strategies in the way that you have a set of functional tests that give you quick feedback, that you can run them very quickly and see if changes are actually affecting your application or not. And when you are already through that phase, you can start thinking about other layers as you need. So maybe you need to test visual changes, maybe you need to do performance testing, and so on. So in my opinion, this evolution of the web is giving us the option of having so many tools to test different types of levels of and layers of the application that we want to test. So having said that, how does Selenium fit in that concept, in that scenario that I was talking about a moment ago? Let's take as an example this application we developed in Selenium 4, which is the web UI for the Selenium grid. We did that from scratch. It's a application made in React, and it has components. It has, like, in general, most of the good practices, you would say, if you want to say that, because we're not experienced React developers, but it's decent, I would say, and it follows most of the good principles about this type of application. So you can see that I'm going to move the mouse. Like, this is a component. This is another component. Like the left bar is another component. So there are different components that help us to show the contents to the user. And when you start thinking about the different levels of testing, you could maybe think conceptually that you have the presentation, you have the logic. This is where maybe the web application is doing some smart things in a light way to avoid using too much processing power from the browser. And there is also the service side, which you can write over there unit testing, you can write API tests, and this is usually on a place where there are more resources to do processing. So when we think about the old approaches, having a tool that is used for end-to-end testing, this normally is going to help us cover all the layers, right? Like with a single test, we can go to the presentation, logic, and service layer. The problem is that when that test fails, it's really hard to know where the bug is. Is it in the logic layer? Is it the service layer? And then you have to start debugging that end-to-end test. And that's one of the issues of focusing and only using like end-to-end tests. In some companies I've been and with some tester friends that I have talked to, they like to use the approach of using service mocks, which means you don't need to start the whole API service to run the web application and test properly, right? So in those contexts, you're able to test the presentation and the logic layer without having the API running. And one name for that type of testing could be integration testing. And that's a valid approach because, for example, in one of my jobs when I was a full-time tester, we had a team where there were back-end developers and front-end developers. And most of the time, the front-end developers were quicker than the back-end developers. So it was really hard for us to actually test the whole application. And then we started to get into this approach of having mocks that were replacing the real API. And that was helping us to actually do integration testing. So this is another type of testing that is not so popular, but is actually helping you to test, focus it what you want to test in the web application. But there is something else that could be present, But before moving to the next type of testing, something I wanted to highlight is that when you want to think about the tool to do end-to-end testing and the tool to do good integration testing, in my opinion, Selenium is a good fit. Or more saying that like any WebDriver-based tool is a good fit because they are based on a standard and they understand how browsers work. So you could talk about Nightwatch, WebDriver.io, Selenium itself, Selenite, different bunch of tests frameworks that are built on top of Selenium or WebDriver. And these type of tools are really good to do end-to-end testing and integration testing. But now, if we want to talk about this new type of testing that the evolution of web frameworks is giving us, is the component testing, right? Because in React, you have components that have logic in them that you can actually test them without deploying the application. So you could render one of those components with mock data and then actually test if the application, if the component behaves properly. And there are tools out there that can help you do that testing that are perfect for that purpose. So in the Selenium project, we use Jest, which is this icon here, and we use a library that is called testing library that is excellent. And with those two tools, we're actually able to test in a much more efficient way our web application. So just leaving as an open question, if you would guess how many tests we have written between unit tests and API tests, how many would you say? Like, how many do we have in the grid for Selenium? 50, 100, 200, 300? So to answer right away, because we're not so interactive in this type of presentations, we have around 150 tests in the Selenium grid. So this is tests for the GraphQL API, unit tests for the Selenium grid itself in the Java code, and also unit tests inside the React code. And now let's go one level higher. Let's talk about components. So how many tests do we have that are component tests that help us to be sure that the application works well. So we have around 30 tests that are actually rendering the component, putting a mock data behind it, and then rendering it, and then we're able to verify that things are working well. And this is the part that shocks most of the people in the Selenium project, where we press browser automation and we want people to use it in a good way. The amount of tests we have to test the Selenium Grid UI is just 3 tests. One to check that the node is being registered and it shows up. Another one to create a session just to show that the session is there. And the third one is just to show that the session is ended and the session is gone from the UI. That's it. Because basically, you don't need to have 20 or 30 tests to test the logic that you can actually test in the component level or in the integration level. Having said all that, I want to share a bit the approach that we have been thinking about, the tooling we're offering in Selenium 4 and all the frameworks that are based on WebDriver. So I will try to share this through a practical demo. And for that, I have created a very simple web application that is a to-do app. And the idea is that you type something like, I want to go running, I want to buy milk. And then in the background, this application will query Unsplash, this website that gives you free images, and then it will just put an image that is related to the item we're entering. The application also has basic authentication, and the application also has some shallow root components that will be useful for our demo. So I'm just going to move to the left here. And just to show you, this is the application. And then it's just a very simple user and password. So this is the application we have. So I was saying, it just pulls data from Unsplash. So let's try. So this is running Gitpod. So you're welcome to try the code I'm going to show. It's available in GitHub. I'm going to share the links at the end, but the application is here. It's called my Visual To Do app. And if you click here at the bottom, you can just deploy it in Gitpod. It's an excellent platform to develop in the cloud. And then all the tests I'm going to show are here in the Selenium 4 demo repository I have here in my GitHub account. So going back to the slides, let's move to the next one. So I want to do a small demo that will show you how to do basic authentication with Selenium 4. I have the examples in Java. It works for all languages in Selenium. I just do Java because that's the language I maintain the most. We're actually having some issues in Python and in the Selenium project. So some of these features might be not available in Python, but in the other languages, they are working and they are actually tested. So also, if you check this repository is made for demo purposes. So there will be code duplicated. There will be things that don't look perfect. So don't take this as an example of how to structure a test suite, okay? So let's get started with Authenticate. I'm getting I'm using a Chrome browser, and then we're having this augmenter for the driver, which basically registers a username and a password whenever the page is loaded. So when this is registered with the driver, then the page gets loaded. And what we're going to do is that we're going to wait for a moment, and then we're just basically going to assert that we're able to be in the page we want to load. So I'm just going to run this quickly. And the URL is just configured in some configuration class. So there you go. That's the page. That was the basic authentication demo that we have been struggling for a while because many browsers removed this feature a while ago. Cool. So let's move to the next one. and this one is the shadow DOM. So the shadow DOM, I'm going to go back to the web application, and I'm going to open the developer tools. So I'm going to make this slightly bigger. No, not this, but this part. So Shadow DOM has been there for a long time, and it has many different uses. One of them is to actually render components, let's say it in an independent way. So you can render the typical use cases when you want to render the Twitter button to say tweet this content, and you don't want the button to be affected by the CSS styles of the website. So you just embed it, and the button will be basically hidden from the other styles that are present in the web application. But there are many other use cases. So what I want to show here is that in general, what you find is that when you want to interact with Shadow DOM elements, in the past, you had to play a lot with JavaScript and parse elements here and there. And there were other frameworks who were going a bit further than this. Like I think 𝒂𝒊𝒂 was already like giving you a much more decent API. But anyway, when we decided to work on the standard, so for example, Jim Evans wrote most of the standard, and then it was passed, then it was implemented by Chrome driver and Gecko driver in Firefox and so on. So the idea is that you can now access Shadow DOM elements in a standardized way. So most of the time, what you have to do is to find what is called the shadow root. So in this case, we have this element that you see, the type of element is just called app name. And here we have inside the shadow root. And this H1 is actually the content of this text being shown here, my visual to do app. So the idea is that in the past, to get this element, you actually had to play with JavaScript exec script and do many things, and basically go through different workarounds. Today, you can do this in a very standardized way with Selenium WebDriver. So let me go back to the demo. And the idea will be to actually get that element and assert that the content is the one we expect. The test got a bit more sophisticated, so we have to register, the authentication part before opening the site. But then let's talk about this. So the first thing we have to do is to find the element that contains the shadow root. In this case, it was called app name, and what we get from this search is this: we have a web element, and then the web element we have to ask for the shadow root, and from here we get a search context, and in this context we can basically do the normal things of find element and so on. So what we're doing here is we're going to look inside that shadow DOM element for an element that is an ID. So that has an ID called app name. And I'm just realizing the example is not very straightforward because I duplicated the name of the element. But I hope you get the idea that you have a shadow root, and inside that root, there is a context that has other web elements. And when you are able to access that context, you're able to then do the search that you usually do. So I'm just going to run this test and show you that it is possible to get the content from Shadow DOM elements in a standardized way. And the test passes because, yeah, the assertion works. Okay, so this was not so spectacular. I mean, for people who have been using Shadow DOM for a while, this is quite important, but for the ones who are not using that, then it's like, okay, not super interesting. Now let's talk about an interesting feature that Selenium 4 has, and it's the relative locators. I'm just going to express my personal opinion here that this is a feature that we haven't heard much feedback from the community. So we have no clue if it has been useful or not. We don't know if it's actually working in the way users are, are actually expecting. So this is just a call for help. Like if you are using this feature, join in our Slack channel, and I will share the link at the end. Please let us know if you're using this, if you want to change this, and if it's not working for you, please create a GitHub issue that we can triage and make it work for you. So let's have a demo about it. What I will try to show you in the demo is that you could, for example, add 3 items, right? Like you could say buy cheese, and then you could say go to the park, and then you could say, I don't know, go to the gym, right? So I will show a test that is able to say, okay, which element is in the middle, and then I want to assert that above this element there is one that is saying go to the gym, and that below this element there is one saying go to the park. And I will be able to do that by saying above, below, to the left, or to the right. So using the relative position of the elements according to the one I'm finding. I see someone who is in the chat or in the Q&A saying that it's not working. So I invite you to please create a GitHub issue so we can triage that as soon as we can. Cool. So let's go to the code, and I'm going to close this one. And now the test is getting more sophisticated because I'm just trying to follow good practices where before creating new items in the application, I'm just going to delete everything, which is this part. I'm just calling an API in the application saying delete all the items. And then here I'm able to say, this is my username and password. And now I'm going to go to locating items by their relative location. So I will enter top item by cheese, middle item by wine, bottom item clean the table, and then I will be able to locate the top and the bottom by just using relative locator. So here I'm gonna look the item that is interesting for me, so the one that is in the middle. I'm just gonna wait until the element is there, right? So when I find the element that is important for me, what I can do, I can say driver.find element, etc. And the key part is saying here, I want the element that is above the element that is in the middle. I will make it blurry, then I will remove that blurry part, and then I will do the same thing with the one that is below. Let's run this test quickly so we can jump to the most interesting demo that I feel it's more valuable for us. So we add all the 3 items. I just refresh the page to see that they're there. So I blurry the one above, unblurry, and then I blurry the one below. So this was a demo of relative locators. Let's move to the last one, which I think it's the most interesting one, and it's about network interception. And the concept behind it is that we can, with Selenium 4, we can manipulate the network communication between the browser and the whatever it is in the backend of the web application. So I think it's easier if I show it with an example. So let's go back to the code. Let's close this one. And for example, this is the basic test that I'm adding an item. So I'm not going to run this one because this is not showing me the features I want to show. But then let's try to run this one. So the use case here is that I want to test that I am able to add an item to the web application, right? And I know that when I add an item, implicitly the web application will, in the background, will query Unsplash and will fetch an image from Unsplash and display it um, in my user interface. And this is great. This is super nice. But if I want to run, I don't know, 100 tests or 50 tests, so 50 times calling to Unsplash and retrieving images is a bit too much. So perhaps I would like to mock the image that is being sent back because I am interested in the actual feature, which is adding the item, checking it, deleting it, etc., etc. I'm not interested in validating that the content from Unsplash is valid or not. So I'm going to add an item that says buy rice, and normally Unsplash would just show me a picture of rice, right? But what I'm going to do right now is that instead of showing the picture that Unsplash is giving me, I'm going to show this cat and dog image here. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to get the image from the disk, and I'm going to create a matching pattern. So I'm going to say all the requests that go to unsplash.com, I'm just going to replace the response, or I'm just going to mock them, and I'm going to use the image. I'm going to load from the disk, and then I put this into the network interception logic. And basically it will just enter the item, and when all things are happening in the network layer, it will get replaced. So let me show this to you. So what's happening now, the application loads, and then the item is entered, and then I see the image. So you see that the image loaded really fast. And that's one of the purposes of having network interception, that we have now tools that can help us speed up our tests. But I mean, replacing the image is nice, but maybe we have the use case where the front end is ready and the API is not ready yet, right? So maybe we want to mock the response from the API. The example I will have here is that I will enter an item that says clean the bathroom, and instead of showing that, I will mock the response from the API, and I will just display go to the park. And to do that, I do something very similar to what I did before. I will analyze and match all the requests, and requests that match the items endpoint and that they are a post, so creating an item to the API. I will replace the responses with all this, but basically I will say that instead of showing what I actually entered, which was clean the bathroom, I will show go to the park. And the great part of this is that you're able to develop tests without having to wait for the API to be ready. So in this case, clean the bathroom, then we can see that it's there. We click on add item, and then we mock the response as go to the park. And that was the demo that shows you how we can actually develop tests that can be more suitable to the way frameworks work nowadays. Web frameworks, I try to say. So one interesting question is, how is this working? Like what is happening under the hood in Selenium? So I've mentioned this a few times already, but I just wanted to highlight that Selenium works closely with the browser and testing tools workgroup in the W3C organization. And currently, the WebDriver BiDi protocol is being developed. So there is active development. There is a meeting every month. And what happens here is that all companies are really invested into this. And an interesting example of this is that the Chrome DevTools engineering blog, so the folks who developed Puppeteer and CDP, they're actually betting on this new standard to be the standard for web browser automation, as the blog says there, the future of cross-browser automation, because the idea is that they want to offer an interface that is stable, that you're able to use, and you don't have the need to change your code when new versions are being released. So work is happening, and the first bits are already landing in Firefox. But as I said a moment ago, this is just work in progress. So there are a few things that are already working without the actual implementation of WebDriver by DAI. So right now, what we're using in most of the situations in Selenium under the hood, we're using the Chrome debugging protocol, so CDP. And one of the things we have done in the project is to allow you to use a method that talks directly to CDP. So this is just a word of warning that it's a debugging protocol. There is lots of data sent back and forth, so it is very verbose. And normally this is connected to a specific version of Chrome. So if there are breaking changes, please be aware that your code can actually break. So handle with care, and as much as possible, try to use the methods that we're offering in the project that won't be changing, because when WebDriver by DAI is there, we're going to replace that. We're going to replace the code that is using Chrome debugging protocol for the actual implementation of WebDriver by DAI. All right, so just to start closing this presentation, I just want to offer a little look into the future of the Selenium project. And one of the things is that we made a survey like 1 year ago about the things that you would like to see in the Selenium project happening, right? And one of the common ones was, like, wouldn't it be nice that Selenium figures out by itself the browser drivers, and why not the browsers? So since this week, we started working actively developing the code that will be the Selenium manager. So inside Selenium, there will be a component that will figure out the browser driver. So if you don't have it configured, it will download it. And in the middle to long term, if you don't have the browser downloaded, Selenium will download it for you. The person who is actually working on this is Bonnie Garcia, who is the person who developed the WebDriver manager for Java. So we're very excited into this, and we will release this in an iterative way. So we won't have everything done and then release it. We will first adopt Chrome driver and then put it in all bindings and move slowly in a way that people can start using these features as soon as possible. Next thing we are working actively is to bring the WebDriver community together. So one of the things that the Selenium project has ignored for a long time is all the other projects that are built on top of the project. So Selenite, Nightwatch, 𝒄𝒐𝒏𝒄𝒆, I don't know, like Serenity.js. So many projects that are built on top that are helping actually the WebDriver community. And we're trying to get closer to them to see how we can collaborate, how we can make Selenium better or the WebDriver standard better. And more than that, we are starting pretty soon a program called, well, tentative name, Selenium Ambassador. And we want to do is to celebrate the people who are creating content for Selenium in a way that we can support their efforts, potentially fund their meetups, and invite them to have a voice into the Selenium roadmap. Because in the end, WebDriver is much more than Selenium. So normally, I don't know if it's for good or for bad, but we have always seen as Selenium is the thing that you have there and the thing you have to use. And WebDriver is the standard that you can implement on your own or maybe work it with Selenium. But the thing is that if Selenium is not enough for you and you need additional features, then Most of the time, there are projects who are already doing all that. And we have tons of projects in the ecosystem like Serenity.js. You have the boa constrictor. We have Atata for C Sharp. We have Capybara. We have Water. We have Nightwatch. We have Weather.io. We have Fluent Selenium. So many projects out there that have tons of feature ready to use for you. And we are now starting to help them promote their efforts because, you know, WebDriver is much more than Selenium. And to start running up, this is just an invitation for you to come to the project. Head to selenium.dev/support. You will find our Slack channel, our mailing list, and so forth. And if you want to check the demos, that's the URL for the repository and for the application as well. And with that, I would like to thank you for being here, for taking the time to check and listen to my talk. And thank you for the invitation, Manoj, and looking forward to the next one. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Diego, for wonderful insights. We are already overshoot by 1 minute, but we could take a question and go from there. I think there was already a question on what are the new additions that we can expect part of upcoming releases that you already covered in the last few slides. So I'm going to skip that. And there's a question on, is there any plan to enter Selenium into API testing? I think this is something you already answered. I think there was a quote around
Yeah.
saying relying on a test on a single tool seems like a bad idea for long term. Yeah. Yeah, could you elaborate more on it?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question because there are tools doing that, right? And many people are looking for the tool that solves everything. But I believe when you have more tools, you're able to think in a more diverse way, and you can like bring your skills more upfront as a tester. Um, but yeah, I mean, if you think that that's a valid use case, you can always combine tools in the different languages, like REST tools or Requestium in Python that do all the API testing you want, and you can combine it with Selenium. But inside Selenium, no, we're not going to have any API testing features for you.
Yeah. Next question from Ruth. I had a test recently that failed to find an element when using a data test ID as a selector, but was able to find it using a class. Any idea why that might be?
Probably the selector with the data test ID was not correct, because if it works with one and not the other one, probably the other one wasn't correct. But it's really hard. But the point is that if you go to selenium.dev/support, you will find the Slack channel there, and then you can ask us those questions, and you can share your code, and we can help you with all these little questions that might be interesting for the audience.
Cool. One last one from Mahati. Will there be any changes to the Selenium Grid 2 in the future?
The grid is evolving, so one of the next things we're trying to look at is there is a dynamic grid that scales up automatically. We're trying to find a more how could you say that a more straightforward way to scale it up in Kubernetes. We're looking into that with the contributions, and we're also um, thinking about allowing people to download files. It's coming a common use case, and the next thing we're also thinking is about um, pushing results to some data storage, like the videos, the logs, and the metadata from the session. So it's evolving, but there isn't like a super long roadmap for it.
Sure. Thanks, Diego. If you want to listen more on Grid, I'm giving a small promo. Diego, don't mind. I mean, I'm giving a keynote tomorrow on Selenium 4 in the future. So some of the highlights that Diego showed today will be covering in depth detail with some more demos, especially around grid and observability. So feel free to tune in and to learn more about grid. So yeah, I think with that, we are almost end of the session. So thank you so much, Diego. I know it's a bit late in Berlin, but thank you so much. I know you're all gearing up for the Test Automation Summit that's happening tomorrow. So good luck with that. I hope you meet all that's the most invited events within the Selenium community, and say my hi to everyone there. And thanks so much for making it for TestMu at this time. And we look forward to having you in the upcoming TestMu sessions the upcoming years. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the invitation, and meet you in the next automation summit we make. Thank you
Yeah,
everyone for being
thank
here.
you so much. Thanks everyone.